George Truett, a well-known pastor in Texas, had a very good story that he shared. He went over to visit a very wealthy Texas man, and as good wealthy Texans like to do, show off all the wealth. And after dinner, took Dr. Truett out to show him all of his land. He said, "Dr. Truett, 25 years ago I had nothing. Now, as far as you can see, look all around you. It's all mine. You see that over there, all those sprawling fields of grain? It's all mine. You look over that way, see all those cows? As far as you can see, there's cattle. It's all mine. See on the other side, all the forest area? It's all mine." He was really bragging, putting it on good. And Dr. Truett was truly impressed. And then Dr. Truett had a response he wanted to ask the man. And Dr. Truett said, "I wonder how much property you have up that way." And the man said, "I hadn't really thought about that. Maybe we ought to talk." Well, Jesus had very similar words so long ago for all of us about how we look at life, how we look at our material wealth. And it's wonderful to have land. It's wonderful to have cattle and cars and all these other things. But do we have our priorities put together? Are we clear who the master is? Sometimes people wake up in their life and realize that they've collected many things and have a lot of wealth, but they've lost control. And they found that they're no longer in charge of their wealth. Their wealth is in charge of them. They're stuck taking care of all the materialistic things around them, and they've lost track of things. Well, Jesus has words for us in this. And I appreciate the words Jesus shares. They're not some idealistic dream up in the clouds somewhere, but down-to-earth life. Well, it's found in the Gospel of Matthew in chapter 6, and you'll find it up on the walls behind me, and it's in your bulletin if you'd like to follow along with these words. "Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy, and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where moth and rust do not destroy, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." Do you mind if I read that verse one more time? There's so much truth there. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. The eye is the lamp of the body. If your eyes are healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eyes are unhealthy, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light within you is darkness, well, how great is that darkness? No one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. May God add power to the reading of this word, that though it has deep wisdom, it truly comes alive to us. And it's God's Spirit that connects the message of His word with your hearts this morning. It's a big question that Jesus brings up, and it's a question in all of our hearts. What is more important to you? What is the most important thing to you? What would you be willing to risk your life in order to gain? What matters the most to you, really? What is it that makes the difference? What gets you up in the morning? What gets you going through the day? What is it that's got your heart and keeps you pulling along through the day? Jesus has words there. Be careful. A lot of times we're not understanding what's guiding us and what is pulling us along, and we need to start paying attention, bringing a light to expose these things. And Jesus had words to share with us, words of caution. What good will it be for you to gain the whole world, yet forfeit your soul? I've had many conversations with friends about making money, getting wealthy, and getting ahead with things, what the latest investment tip is, and so on and so on. And I thought, if it all works out, it works out perfect. We win the lottery half a dozen times and more wealth than you can possibly comprehend. And if we lose our soul in the process, well, what have you gained? You've lost everything. You've lost out on far, far too much. Jesus calls it what it is, our treasure, what we build up for ourselves. What is it we prize? What is it that fills our attention day and night too? What gets us going? Our treasure. Is our treasure found here on earth in worldly things? Or is our treasure found in heaven and in spiritual things? Things that make a little more matter to us, the things that matters in life. John D. Rockefeller epitomizes it so well about wealth. He was asked the question, Dr. Rockefeller, how many millions does it take to satisfy a man? His answer was real quick, the next million. More and more. And after Rockefeller's death, the reporters were all crowding around where he was and had all kinds of questions. This wealthy man, wealthiest man in the world, what about it now? And one of the big questions that came up to his representative was this one. How much did he leave behind? This is going to be a headline. And the assistant to Rockefeller answered it this way. He left it all behind, boys. He left everything. We can't take it with us. We have to make the most of it while we can. And how are we going to make the most of it? How are we going to put it together where it truly matters? I want to share with you a concept. For some people, this is wonderful news. For some people, this is horrible news. It's called, write it down if you want. You'll impress your friends with this. Hedonic adaptation. Hedonic adaptation. What that means is we adjust to our situation. We are very resilient creatures in this world, and we adjust. If our finances are up pretty good, we adjust to that. And if we hit 4 times, we adjust to that as well. Studies have been done repeatedly. People that win the lottery, and this is where the bad news comes in, that they adjust to their newfound income. And they'll do their studies. Those that are willing to go through everything, they'll find 1 year after people have won millions and millions of dollars, what is their emotional life like? How happy are you now? And they find that after about a year, it takes about a year for us to adjust to our good things or bad things, however they work out. People respond by saying, they're about as happy now as they were before they got all the money. They just got used to it, and they made the most of it. I remember when I was in college, I was in poverty. I didn't know it. I'm glad I didn't know it back then. I'd have gotten depressed. But I made do going to McDonald's for a hamburger, and if I could splurge, I'd get some French fries, but I was okay. I learned to adjust, and I was happy with that one. It was good to go. We have to learn how to reduce our consumption, living more simply, and focus on experiences, not things. We start focusing on concrete material things. That's when we've taken a bad turn and we start going a different way. That's not going to bring us true satisfaction. Hedonic adaptation. After you have some adjustments in life, give it about a year. And we'll find that emotionally we catch up with ourselves. We catch up with everything, where we're headed and what we're doing. Have hope in all of that. Jesus says the eye is the lamp of the body. If your eyes are healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eyes are unhealthy, your whole body will be full of darkness. I like the way Jesus taught. He taught things that you just didn't get immediately. Some of his parables, if you understand them right, they'll wake you up in the middle of the night, cause you some sleeplessness, thinking about what that really means. He has a hidden charge to his words. But the eye is the lamp of the body. What are we seeing? What are we looking at? What's coming into us? What are we allowing to come into us? Is it good things? Is it bad things? I've had many conversations with very good friends. They have comments like this: the world is such a terrible place. Everything is so bad. There's not much reason for hope in this world. Just turn to the headlines. Just pick up any newspaper. You'll see it. This past week, I was checking some of those headlines. They are awful. A woman beats up another woman in front of that woman's child? That's awful. A rapist moves next door to a rape victim? That is horrible. A man with a knife attacks a police station, which is not only horrible, it's a bad idea. They have guns. You don't, but he did it anyway. Multiple deaths in highway accidents. We read those news, and it is awful, isn't it? Let me give you a reality alert. Are you listening to me? It's the news. It's the news media. That's their job, is to pick up bad news and post it everywhere. How many of you have ever wanted to pick up a newspaper had this headline in it? Home in Sun City quiet, mild-mannered, and nice to their neighbors. Oh, you want to? Oh, get me a newspaper. Has that one. There we go. A man gives a stranger $1 for a cup of coffee. There we go. Woman picks up trash in her front lawn. A child goes to bed when he's supposed to. I might buy that one. I'd find out what happened there. But that's what they do. They make bad news. And editors, they confess it, said, you're right. And many of them say, and I feel awful about my job trying to foster all that. But it's what sells. That's what the news media does. Looks for the very bad news. But if you put it on the whole scale of everything all around us, that's a tiny percentage of things that are going wrong. There's 99% of things are going right out there. But it's just that no newspapers, unfortunately, are covering any of that. Maybe it wouldn't work. I don't know. It all depends on our perspective, on how we see things. But if you're depressed by the news, let me just tell you, you're reading too much news. Just get on the internet, check the headlines, and let it go. I try to put myself down to 4 minutes. If I'm reading more than 4 minutes, I'm getting depressed. So got to get on to better news than that. But how do we see life? How do we see the world around us? How are our eyes? What's coming into our mind, into our soul? What are we processing? I love the story about a couple that was moving into a new town. And there was the old man there, had been there a long time, sitting in his rocking chair in front of the general store, a nice little rural community. And he was there just taking in the day and appreciating it. And the couple drove up and they saw him there and they walked up to him and said, hey, can you give us a minute of your time? And the man said, oh, I'd love to. Sure, what you need? He said, we're thinking about moving into the town here. It looks nice, but we want to know for sure. What are people really like here? Would we really like it? Would we really fit in? Would we really be okay here? And the man thought about it a moment. And he said, well, let me ask you a question. What were the people like where you came from? How'd you get along with them? And the couple said, oh, it was awful. They just stabbed you in the back all the time. They had bad stories. They had bad things. You couldn't trust anybody. We couldn't stand it. In fact, that's why we want to move to get away from that. And the man just kind of looked at him, nodded his head, and said, you know what? That's what you're going to find here, too. And the couple said, oh, thank you. We appreciate your honesty. They got in the car and drove off. Well, a little bit after that, another couple drove up. And they saw the man there and looked at him and got out and said, can we have a minute of your time? And the old man said, well, sure, glad to. What you need? He said, we're thinking about moving into the town here. We like the way things look, but we want to know the truth. What's it really like here? What are the people really like? How is it to get along with them? And the man looked at him, said, well, let me ask you a question. What was it like where you came from? What were the people like there? And the couple said, oh, they were wonderful. They were loving people. They cared for each other. It breaks our heart that we have to move, but we got to move for a business opportunity, for employment. We hate to leave our good friends back there. The man looked at him and said, that's what you're going to find here. People are just that way. Well, what do we make of that guy? Was he just a spoofer, just brainless? Or did he have a certain wisdom about people, certain wisdom about human nature? What we look for is pretty much what we're going to find. What we're seeking around us is pretty much what's going to come to life for us, is pretty much what's going to get there. It's all about contentment. Learning to be content with what we have. The Scriptures speak of this often. Paul says in the book of Philippians, I've learned this great secret here, another secret treasure that we might find, to be content in whatever my situation. Whether I'm hungry, whether I'm well fed, whether I'm living in plenty or in want, I've learned how to be content. Whatever meal I've got in front of me, I can say, this is going to be a good meal. Wherever I might be, I'm going to say, this is a good place to be. I'm going to make up my mind. I'm going to decide that things are okay. He's got healthy eyes. He's got a healthy outlook, a healthy perspective. And he's going to let that guide him throughout the day. I love reading David Thoreau and Walden's Pond. Any Thoreau fans here? We got to throw these out every now and then. But here's those great words that I love so much. Simplicity, simplicity, simplicity. I say, let your affairs be as 2 or 3 and not 100 or 1,000. Instead of 1,000,000, count half a dozen. In the midst of the chopping sea of civilized life, such are the clouds and storms and quicksands and the 1,001 items to be allowed for, that a person has to live if they would not founder and go to the bottom and not make their port at all by dead reckoning. And they must be a great calculator indeed who succeeds. No, I say simplify, simplify, simplify. That's not a good idea. We have too much complexity all around us, too much sophistication, too much things that make it harder than it needs to be. But let our perspective be right. Let us learn contentment. Let us appreciate the daily blessings of what our Lord brings to us. Let our eyes be bright. Let them bring in the right things into our life. In ancient times, there was a king, took over his new kingdom, and he was all excited about it, wanted to know what's here. What's he got in the whole realm of his kingdom? And he called in 2 loyal knights, and he said, I've got tasks for you to do. I need your help. He called the first one to him and said, here's what I want you to do. I need you to go out and travel my entire kingdom. Take a month to do this, and go out and find every weed that you can find. Bring me nothing but weeds. Take an inventory of every weed that's in my new kingdom here. And then in 1 month, come back and I want to hear the report. Show me what you have found of all the weeds that are in my kingdom. And the man said, indeed I shall, sire. And then immediately went out and began his quest to find inventory of all the weeds in the new kingdom. And then the king called the next servant in and said, here's my assignment I have for you. I've got this new kingdom and I want to find out what's here. Go out into this whole kingdom and find every flower that you can find. Take inventory, bring back samples, bring everything you can of every flower that's in my kingdom, and bring a report in 1 month's time. I want to know. And the servant said, yes, sire, I shall be faithful to your decree. And so they both went out. And then 1 month later, they both faithfully came back again. And the king, holding court, called them together and called the first servant and said, come forward, tell me. Tell me of your quest. I have sent you out to find every weed that you could find in my kingdom. And the servant came up and said, oh, your most honorable king, I have bad news for you. Your kingdom is covered with weeds. There's nothing but weeds everywhere. As soon as I stepped out of the castle grounds, I found weeds all around. I went to the next community, there was weeds. There was weeds again over the next hill. I found nothing but weeds in your whole kingdom. I'm so sorry to give you this news, but your kingdom's not good. It's awful. Nothing here but weeds. I'm sorry, but I have been faithful to your call. And the king said, I'm sorry to hear that. And then called in the next servant and said, tell me of your quest. What have you found? And the servant came and said, I have been faithful to what you've called me to do, to find every flower. And I brought back samples and reports. And, O king, I got good news for you. Your kingdom is full of flowers. There's nothing but flowers. Everywhere I went, I found flowers. As soon as I left the castle grounds, I looked over and there's flowers in this field and that field. I went to the next town. Flowers everywhere I went. O king, your community, your kingdom is full of nothing but flowers. How very blessed you are to have such a wonderful, beautiful realm as this. Well, what do you make of that story? Were one of these servants lying? One of these servants gave a bad report? No, they both gave a report of what they were programmed to find. The first one was told to find weeds. That's all he found. The second one was told to find flowers. And that's all he found was flowers. It's all about our perspective. All about those spiritual eyes that Jesus is talking about. What are we programming ourselves to find? Are we looking for the bad? Are we spending too much time in the newspaper? You need to put those things down after 4 minutes. I'm telling you, let it go. Stop being depressed by the bad things that come to us. And start looking for the good that's all around us. Looking for God's handiwork. So often I talk to people about, was God working in our world or not? I always say, are you looking? Are you watching for His hand in this world? People that are looking for God's hand find it. I've talked to people in ICU wards and giving great testimony how wonderful it is that God was there to take care of me, that got me through that. I almost died, but He was able to bring me through to life again. And others that couldn't see God's hand because they simply wouldn't look. Their eyes were not good. Their eyes weren't looking for what God was seeking to show them in their own life. How are we seeing the world? How are we seeing God? Are we even looking for God? Are we even seeing His handiwork in our life? when we begin looking for God's handiwork and God's intervention and God's direction and His will, that's where we find treasure. That's where we find the meaningful things, the things that really matter, the things that abide forever and ever.